Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sterling Live. My name is Caitlin Brower. I am Sterling's social media manager, and Sterling Live is our weekly live series where we come at you on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube with, I have to say, some of the best guests ever. So we've been doing this for over a year now, have had phenomenal episodes, and this is not any different. Today, we have a great episode. As you can see, I have two phenomenal guests above me here, and they are no strangers to Sterling Live. I always make that joke. Once you do Sterling Live once, you're always going to come back for another episode. So please join me in welcoming our guests today. So we have David Bloom, General Manager of Gig, Volunteer, and Consumer here at Sterling. This is his second time on Sterling Live. And we also have Taylor Liggett, General Manager of Sterling Identity. And this is Taylor's third episode. So we're just going to keep tacking those away here. So thank you both for joining me. As you can see on the bottom of the screen, our episode title today is the identity verification solution your gig platform needs in 2022. So before we get into it, I want to give our guests a chance to introduce themselves to our audience. So Taylor, I'll pass it off to you first to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone, and Caitlin, thanks for having me back. My name is Taylor Liggett. I oversee all of identity services for Sterling. So that would be basically everything identity verification related, digital wallet, fingerprinting, biometrics, all that fun stuff. I've been with Sterling for about 5 years at this point. Came by way of acquisition back in 2017. So pleasure to be with you today.
Absolutely. David, can you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining our presentation and our conversation today. I'm the General Manager of Sterling's Gig and Marketplace vertical. I'm responsible for our clients, our business success, and our client success in this vertical. I came to Sterling about 4 years ago, and in a previous career ran product and product strategy organizations and was an API startup founder for a number of years.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you for joining us again on Sterling Live. Already got some love over on Facebook, Taylor. Someone's saying, go, Taylor, go to you. So that brings up a great note. It's great timing for that. So if you are watching live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, you can comment and you can send in questions live for Taylor and David. All you have to do is go into the comment section on this video, and please give us your comments, give us your questions. I'll get the questions over to Taylor and David, excuse me, as I see it fit throughout the episode. So why don't we go ahead and get into it? So I want to start with talking about identity verification. So Taylor, I've got a couple of questions for you in regards to this. David, feel free to chime in throughout these questions. But the first, question, it's more of just kind of like asking you, can you tell us a little bit about identity verification?
Yeah, for sure. So look, I think that the way that we should think about identity verification, certainly the way that Sterling does, is relatively straightforward. So if you just consider that we want to make sure that any candidates that we're going to screen are who they say they are, right? So is the person the actual person there that they're saying that they are, and then also is all associated biographic data, so name, date of birth, social security number, etc. Is that all accurate? That's the way that just very simply we think about identity verification.
So can you talk a little bit about, and this is, a lot of great conversation, a lot of new things here, so we have a partnership with ID Me. So I would love for our audience to understand that a little bit more before we get into the more technical things.
Yeah, for sure. So look, I think that the way identity verification has worked for a very long time. David and I have been working on identity verification for many years. And most of the providers that are in this space, they're focused on what I refer to as transactional identity verification, meaning that, you go through an identity verification process, maybe you upload a driver's license or what have you, and then that can verify your identity for that specific transaction you're engaging in. You're opening up a bank account, you're doing a background check, whatever the case may be. ID Me is fundamentally different than that, in so much as they offer a trusted digital identity network where once you go through identity verification, that is persisted, that is put under the individual's control, and that is able to be reused. This was incredibly appealing to Sterling, to David and myself when we were looking at this. And we have a very close strategic partnership with ID.me. We have an exclusive partnership between the two parties. We've been working with them for a little over a year now, and have their solution essentially fully embedded within our platform as a step for the pre-employment or gig process when it comes to identity verification.
Very exciting for sure. And, we did do a Sterling Live episode with Taylor and Blake Hall from ID.me. So if you guys are watching on our YouTube channel and you want to check that out, it is on our playlist. So we do dive into the partnership a little bit more, but very exciting stuff for sure. So in regards to the gig economy, so can you explain to our audience, what is identity verification in the employment space? So, and again, in regards specifically to gig.
So I would say gig companies, for the most part, are focused on onboarding efficiency. It is more akin to an e-commerce transaction where you're trying to get a purchaser through a buying funnel than it is a typical HR onboarding process where you already have made an offer and you expect the person to persist through the onboarding experience and start the job. So when gig companies look to identity, they typically look to it for two big reasons. One, of course, is confirm that this is the person that we think they are, especially because in a gig platform, you're typically very hands-off. They're not an employee. You may never meet them face-to-face. Most likely you won't meet them face-to-face. And then the second thing is using some of the data that you can extract from the ID verification process, typically using technology to pull name and address and date of birth off a driver's license or a passport, and using that data to make the onboarding experience even more efficient, free filling forms, etc. And the combination of those things, preventing fraud and efficiency in onboarding, are why gig companies look to identity.
Yeah, and if I could just add something there, Caitlin, real quick. I think one of the things that the gig space deserves a lot of credit for is that if you could, they've been real trailblazers in the space of identity. A lot of the identity solutions that are in market right now are because of early adoption from gig companies for the reasons David had mentioned. I also think that one of the things that we've seen with traditional employers when we talk about identity verification, especially in the context of pre-employment and background screening, is that there's tremendous confusion about identity verification already being a part of the background check, which it is just not inherently out there. We recently did a survey and found that almost 2/3 of the employers we talked to just thought this was part of the SSN trace process and part of the background screen. That's not the case with gigs, so I think that's great. But one of the things that I've seen historically, and I don't know if David would agree with this, is that oftentimes gig companies may run identity on this sort of separate track than the background check. So that, I think they're fully aware that it needs to take place. They have tools in place a lot of times, but it's not necessarily intermingled within the screening process.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think you're right that identity has become more common in the gig space faster than in other industries and for other onboarding purposes or hiring purposes. I do think that the challenge is that gig companies are looking at identity from a pure workflow perspective. How can I get this into my experience and extract value from it? Either, extracting the PII or verifying or taking, we have clients who actually take the image off of a driver's license and use it for administrative and safety purposes later on in the applicant's experience. How do we do that with the least amount of friction to be introduced to our flow? And they haven't thought through all of the potential that true identity verification can provide them. So the value is nice, but it's incomplete the way it's been, for the most part, integrated with gig platforms so far. That's the next generation. That's the next frontier.
Agree.
So let's keep the conversation going around the gig economy. So David, can you explain the current state of the gig economy? But maybe, I know we're like 2 weeks into 2022, so maybe like the tail end of 2021 and maybe right now.
Yeah. The state of the gig economy is strong. I will tell you, it is a very exciting time to be involved in the gig space. Frankly, thrilling, especially for me early in my career as an entrepreneur, building some of the infrastructure that I hoped would become foundational to the gig economy. Seeing where this industry has gone to now is exciting. And the reason for that, one, just a holistic, mostly holistic changes in the world of work have been radically accelerated through COVID. People looking to have more control and more agency, more flexibility. They want to be less beholden to any given boss. They may want to work in different places and on different schedules. Or maybe they're burned out with the old models. Many of those people, and in many industries, low skill, high skill, medium skill, cross-border, are looking for on-demand work and to participate in the gig economy in some way, shape, or form. And it goes far beyond driving and dog walking and babysitting, the typical things that we associate with this industry and were so important in the beginning. And now it goes up to doctors, lawyers, accountants, engineers, rocket scientists. There are on-demand platforms and gig businesses that serve all of those types of work relationships and work positions.
Well, I don't know who was thinking of rocket scientists and the gig economy, but it's there, people. So you're talking about this, it's booming. The gig economy is doing well. It is healthy right now. So with that, what struggles are gig employers having when onboarding these new contractors for their business?
Yeah, so right now what we're seeing is the variability of supply, worker supply for these platforms. Is causing a lot of problems, right? You have 1 month, you have more applicants than you know what to do with, and the next month, COVID has gone down and no one wants to work today, and there's no workers. So companies are dealing with that whiplash, day to day, week to week, month to month fluctuations in supply and demand. The second thing is the competition. There's a lot more competition for workers today. So how you present yourself to the worker and get them through your funnel and engage and activate them is a rapidly growing challenge. You know, it's not just that there is 1 or 2 places that you can use your car to make money, or babysit, or walk a dog, or do sort of restaurant shifts or hospitality shifts. There's many. And so the difference in sort of supply and demand and increased competition are creating a lot of challenges. And how a platform or community, a gig platform or gig community responds to those challenges is going to tell them whether they're going to scale successfully or not scale successfully.
Could you provide an example of how some organizations are responding to these challenges, or maybe some ideas on how they could?
Yeah. So first, I think the companies that are looking market by market, and rather than looking at sort of broad-based averages, are much better able to assign resources and acquire the right supply, the worker supply that they need to get. And 2, the companies that truly think of this as a community, not just a set of workers that need to be deployed or monetized, but understand that these people are here because they may have economic and social and personal reasons for being there, and that you're thinking of that worker holistically, that really starts to set people apart, start setting platforms apart, and will allow them to attract and therefore lower the cost of acquisition from the competition. And you also wind up with more motivated and higher performing workers on your platform. All of that really matters. And frankly, part of what we're here to talk about is identity. And it is a sneaky secret weapon of sophisticated gig platforms to use identity to make sure that they are bringing in the right people, the right motivation, and engaging them as early in the process as possible.
So let's talk about this sneaky innovation of identity verification. So I know we briefly spoke about it earlier in the episode, but I do want to get both of your insights on this. So how does adding identity verification affect the turnaround time when onboarding clients and applicants?
So I'm going to jump on this first, and then Taylor may have things to add to it. And I'm going to jump on this first because I want to I want to add to something he said very early and maybe take a slightly different perspective. Taylor said that the way we look at identity is relatively straightforward. And I think it feels that way to us because it's very intuitive. But to the outside world, the way Sterling thinks of identity is not as straightforward and contributes directly to these issues of effective onboarding and worker engagement in ways that other identity solutions just don't serve. We think of identity as the understanding of who that person is holistically, thoroughly. We believe that they are who they represent themselves to be, that we have the right PII about them. Maybe we know something about their history, their work history, their living history. All of that combines to give us a very clear understanding of who this person is, and therefore can help our clients engage that person as quickly and effectively and thoroughly and emotionally as possible. Just as an example, how this plays out in a very practical sense. When you are ID verified by Sterling with our partner ID.me, we not only have the highest standards of fraud protection, so we really have great amounts of trust, but we have verified the PII that we have received from you is the right PII that represents you in the public record and is the right information that should be used in all of the administrative and onboarding processes to come. That feels like ID is now a step or a friction-inducing part, the way a product person might look at it. But what that one step has done is now enable every other step downstream to be much easier and lower friction for the applicant. We don't need to ask you as many questions. We don't need to come back to you when we discover there's a problem as often. The level of trust and engagement you can have with your community is off the bat much quicker. There's higher quality in the background check because of the verification of information. And long term, there are things about a community, like Taylor said, it's not just about transaction, it's about persistent ID verification and the relationship that allows you to have where a platform can engage with a worker ongoing in that trusted way. It's potentially game changing for many gig companies to think of it that way.
Yeah, and what I think it's a really good point, David, and what I would add. So, when we talk about, like my comment earlier, that identity verification is relatively straightforward. I think when we consider the verification of identity, it ties down to those key things. But I think the point you're making is really critical and kind of the crux of what I hope to get across today, which is gig companies out there shouldn't just be looking at identity verification that way. It should be part of a larger kind of identity program, part of their overall kind of trust and safety program. And I think community, as you hit it, really gets to the foundation of what we're talking about. So when you're using a more traditional identity verification solution that's transactional, it's very basic in its purpose of what it does. When you start to expand that to a solution like what we have in place with ID.me, where it's part of a trusted community, a trusted digital identity network, it completely can change the way your entire program operates, right? So if you consider that there are a lot of folks within the gig economy that may work multiple jobs, so to speak, to engage in multiple things, having a way in which that individual only has to prove who they are one time really can be a game changer for their overall involvement and engagement within gig. And we know that one of the biggest things that's measured is candidate conversion, right? How many candidates are you bringing in? How many are converting? And the less friction that you involve in those steps is critical. And I think there needs to be a paradigm shift in how we look at identity in terms of adding friction to where it truly can be, which is reducing and even eliminating friction. We have a client right now who's live with our service that does a lot of high volume hiring. And their pre-verified rate, as we would call it, in other words, the people that have already been verified that are coming into this, is near 40%. And that means that almost 40% of the people who are coming into their workflow, when they start, they simply log in with their ID.me credential, and they consent to share the requisite information that has been requested. that information is shared, and they're off to the races. It's that easy, right? And for the other 60% of individuals going through this, that's their last time of doing it. You know, the next time that they hit a page where they need to do that, it's as simple as logging in. And if you extrapolate this out, there's tremendous potential to what you can do here, because it doesn't have to just stop with identity verification, right? That person now essentially owns a digital wallet. There's ways to add to a community of gig workers and do all kinds of things, saving other credentials with that to further streamline processes. So that, to me, is sort of the heart of how we need to shift our perspective and be thinking about this.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on this because I think it's like, this is cool. I'm a geek. I've been doing this a long time. I find this so exciting. What you're really talking about is enabling technology, not an interruption. And what Taylor said is that 40% of the people who are applying to work with this client already have been ID verified and can prove that to the client and to Sterling just by logging in flow. They log in, all the data that has already been verified flows into their background check and flows to the client. And now their onboarding is effectively done. That's not possible with an old, I'm going to call it old school. It's not that old, but like with a
couple months ago.
Yeah, like 6 months ago.
Way old in 2019.
Yeah, back in the day.
So far.
Yeah, but that's not possible with a transactional model where everybody has to be verified each time. So there's no persistence of information, and critically, that the data that flows from that kind of transactional experience has, frankly, great technology, but often is error prone because you're using optical character recognition, pretty complicated technology, to extract the PII off of an image and populate your data sets with it, and then have that flow through all of your administrative systems and your background check. Frankly, we've done the studies. We can tell you to the basis point what the error rate is for optical character recognition for some of the largest vendors in the industry. Again, it is great. And if your choice is something like that versus nothing, do that. Do that, because it is important for safety and it's helpful. But if your choice is that or the kind of community-driven, persistent ID verification that we're talking about here, do this.
Definitely. And I love the, pointing into the value that it brings both, our clients and the applicants and everything like that and you both had brought up the idea of being frictionless. So maybe there is something new being added into your entire background screening process, or, your identity process is expanding, you're developing a program. It's really not adding more time, more pain points, things like that. It is truly a frictionless process. So
yeah, and I think the challenge for product leaders and heads of trust and safety and the engineering leads who oversee these programs for gig companies is that they have to reimagine where the applicant's investment and their investment goes, right? There used to be a bit of a formula. I am applying upstream so I can acquire clients, build awareness, get them to land on my platform, then create an account, then follow through on all the tasks I need of them, and then ultimately I'm going to invest in them to engage and show up for work when I want them to. This may be a little bit different, but different doesn't mean worse. In this case, different means better, but but it does take a little bit of an extra effort of imagination. What we're really talking about here, and what Taylor described from that client, is an apply with identity solution. You identify yourself, and that enables all of the rest of the background check and the onboarding to happen programmatically. So when you used to invest time downstream in running the background check and collecting information manually and correcting it when there was a problem, now you invest less time, but you do invest time with the identity step, and everything else goes away. The formula, like the amount of friction overall, is far less. It just looks different. And I think the idea of applying with identity is a concept that this industry is going to spend some time noodling over for a while, but ultimately it is just going to be the way. I don't know, Taylor, if you're seeing the concept of apply with identity.
I think that's the important point, is that it's hard to, like, it can't be overstated how significant the sea change is that we are just embarking upon. When I believe that really this year, and certainly as we move forward, we're going to see significant shifts in sort of the balance of how identity and screening and overall trust and safety programs operate. I think David is exactly right. We're so used to considering screening and identity as sort of a certain part in the workflow. But as you shift to, as he put it, the sort of applying with identity, and then, right up front, like we're not far away from a world in which right up front, companies of all sorts, gig and otherwise, can have a candidate come into their top of funnel workflow pre-verified. And essentially, to the extent that would apply matters depending on sort of the program, but certainly from an identity perspective and potentially other credentials and so on, could be known right up front, and then just streamline the entire process. And it's the type of thing where as it grows, it just builds and it builds and it builds. And more people become a part of this overall trusted ecosystem that they can seamlessly operate within. I threw out the one stat of 40%. This is going to range all across the board, depending on the state, depending on the population of people, and so on. But one thing's for sure, it will do nothing but increase, right? The more that this is adopted, the more that this is used, that population of people will increase. And I think it's so important to also consider that there's dual benefit here. This is not just about benefit to the organization. This is about tangible benefit to the actual individual, right? Empowering individuals to be in control of their own digital identity, their own information. This has, I think, macro consequences that also haven't been fully appreciated. We're so used to being kind of abused almost from a technology and information standpoint, like all of our information just being out there, data being accessed without our permission. Right. This is also a sea change in that regard, starting to have control over what information that I as an individual am sharing, who I'm sharing it with, et cetera. It's starting to shift the balance of power to the individual, but in a way that has significant benefit to the organizations as well.
Yeah. Sorry. This is where you'll start to see my hands float up as I get more excited. I'm getting excited, people. This is it. This is why you lift all them weights or whatever. The value of creating a trusted community and being a member of a trusted community for the individual and the community itself, like now we get to unlock that, right? It used to be, hey, I work for this company and I have these benefits. And if I go on my HR website, I can find out where maybe like the gym membership is 10% off or something like that. And as a lot of people didn't really take advantage of it, right? Things like that. Now the fact that you can use identity to apply, so boom, background check, identity check, all that just sort of happens once I've ID verified myself. That's value. Now I'm trusted. Now you can say things like, hey, if you are a member of XYZ gig platform, now you can log on all these places and maybe get a discount where you didn't have to worry about the coupon and installing and all this other stuff. Now there's more anti-fraud because the community is on the lookout for people who are trying to sort of break in with a fake identity, a synthetic identity. Now the community is safer. So these are all real value. This is all real value that accrues to both the worker and the platform, whereas it wasn't possible before. That's what's so exciting. And when we talk about scale, this is another important part that I think the gig industry needs to appreciate. The gig industry is used to being the 600-pound gorilla in a lot of transactions, especially when it comes to trust and safety, because of just the immense volume of background checks and ID verifications and other vendor transactions, whether it's background checks or something else that they do relative to the number of employees they have. And that is helpful because you have a lot of market power, gig platforms, we know this. But it also puts you at the position of being asked to provide services to other people, right? If you paid for a bunch of background checks that someone else then gets to take advantage of, that kind of feels crappy. But in this case, we're talking about a national community of pre-verified people before the gig industry is fully engaged with it. This is the same ID verification systems that are used by departments of motor vehicles, like in California, like the Veterans Administration, like
The IRS.
The IRS, right? What is it? Something like a third of the American population is now ID verified by ID.me.
Just about. Certainly this year they'll pass 100 million.
100 million already verified.
Mm-hmm.
You are not the ones, I'm talking to you, gig industry, you are not the ones that are being asked to contribute. You get to ride the coattails of the identity revolution that ID.me has already initiated. You get to take advantage of all those people who are already ID verified and can enroll or apply with ID already. That's actually like the beauty. It's already there. The community already exists.
Absolutely. A beautiful thing for sure. So just a quick reminder, if you are watching us live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube right now, if you have any final questions for Taylor and David, please go ahead and submit them now in the comment section. While we wait for any potential new questions to come in, I got to just say, this episode's been phenomenal. All you people watching are very, very fortunate to have Taylor Liggett and David Bloom just talk great things about gig and identity for you. I do want to gather some final thoughts from the two of you as we wrap up today's episode, though. So Taylor, I'll start with you for final thoughts for our audience.
Yeah, it's been a great discussion. I think we hit on most of the things that we wanted to discuss. One of the things, though, that was not discussed that I just would also add as another thing to consider is that for the gig industry to really get your wheels turning on the myriad different possibilities once you have an ecosystem that operates like this. So we've talked a lot about trust and safety and identity and screening, but there's also potential, when you have the sheer amount, the near 70 million people, as I mentioned a moment ago, will certainly surpass 100 this year. When you have that many people, there's also a chance to engage with individuals like this and start to offer them almost direct job opportunities. So imagine I'm an individual, and within my trusted profile, I can say, you know what, I like to work gig opportunities, I like to do driving and delivery, or I like to do whatever the case may be. And then there's a way to sort of directly improve both candidate acquisition from an organization as well as job opportunities at the individual level. There's so much challenge right now in attracting new talent and in working through everything there. This operates in a way where we can directly engage candidates that are interested in certain opportunities and companies who are looking to hire them. That's one of the things we're looking to pilot as well this year. It's a new kind of employment marketplace, a new jobs hub from Sterling and ID.me. So be on the lookout for that. I think that's also going to do some really cool things.
Very cool. I'm excited for that for sure. So David, final thoughts from you for our audience today.
Yeah, there is a risk that you hear buzzwords like ID verification and digital wallet and apply with identity and some of these other things, and you feel like it's just like business speak soup, and it will never actually pay off. Like we're never actually going to see the fruition of sort of a position paper, right? I will tell you, this is it. This is the time when the things that this industry has imagined about enabling workers and enabling consumers, demand, frankly, to come together in a trusted way and make those transactions frictionless and safe and value added for everybody involved. This is the moment when all of those aspirations go to another level. We've hit the first level. I think we're done with chapter 1 of the gig story. We've built the deck of unicorns in the public companies, and we've changed the way people think about the future of work. Mm-hmm. This is where the future of work is actually creating community and individual value on all sides of your marketplaces. And that's what makes this year so exciting for me and for all of our colleagues.
I love that. And I also loved this episode. As I said earlier, it was truly amazing to sit down and talk with both of you, Taylor and David. The two of you dropped an insane amount of insights. And don't worry if you didn't catch us live today, this video is on demand. So you'll always have a chance to catch everything that we spoke about over the last 35 minutes or so. But with that being said, I do want to leave you all with a call to action, because this is not it for Taylor and David. You are not done seeing their faces, because they are going to be at Talent Acquisition Week next week on Friday, January 28th. I believe it is the 28th. Yes, the 28th. David and Taylor are going to be joined by ID.me's Mark Lockwood, and they're speaking more about why your hiring tech stack needs to include identity verification. So as if you guys enjoyed today, you're going to even more enjoy next week. It's going to be a great presentation. You do have to register, but don't worry. Go to, David, Taylor, or Mark Lockwood's social media profiles. You'll get a 10% discount. So you can see all of that on there. Go to Sterling's profile pages. You can see more information around about the event there. As always, you can always visit sterlingcheck.com, where we have great resources on gig, on identity, on all things background screening. So if you want more, you can always go there. But I must say, Taylor and David, thank you so much for joining me today. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to the two of you. I learned so much in such a short amount of time. And as I said earlier, you both are coming back on Sterling Live. This isn't your final time, the two of you. But yes, I thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for being on the call with us today.
Thank you, everyone. And we will see you next time for Sterling Live.
Cheers.